10.3 Subtract a Group Notes. So in this lesson, we will be using a lot of the distributive property, but we want to look at different ways that we can use that in a kind of a trickier way, actually. And so our first examples that we're going to be using are going to be expressions. And expressions are kind of mathematical phrases. So an example would be 8 parentheses 2x minus 4. So it doesn't include an equal sign. When you do include an equal sign, then it becomes an equation. So here we have our expression, and we kind of want to change the form. So our easy way of thinking about it is that distributive property, taking that times 8, remember it's a times, a hidden multiplication there. So a times 8, and distribute that out to the 2x and the negative 4. So we need to make sure that we get it to the second term also. So 8 times 2x is 16x, and 8 times negative 4 is a negative, so we're going to bring that negative down, and 8 times 4 is 32. And that is kind of our simpler form, or just a different form, and that 8 is distributed out, so it's kind of more an expanded form. All right, another example of this is, and we're looking at that distributive property, thinking that distributive property in our head, the opposite, or the negative of the group of 7x plus 32. And with this one, this is the tricky one. And so it's kind of hard to think about it. Remember when we were up here at number 1, the 8, I think we realized, like, a lot of us just like, oh yeah, we just multiply by 8 to the first one and multiply by 8 to the second one. So this second one is also that, but what's hiding here, like that multiplication was hiding, is a 1 in here that's hiding. It's not a 1, it's a negative 1, and that's being multiplied. So that's what's going to be distributed times a negative 1 to both of these terms. So negative 1 times 7x is negative 7x. And I find that a lot of people, they get this negative correct. It's usually the second one, because that negative 1 times has to be distributed out to that second term. So negative 1 times positive 32 is a negative 32. And the most common mistake is to keep this as a plus 32. So we want to make sure that we watch for that. And that is the trickiest of the distributive property. Now, I call it a subtract a group because it gets a little tricky. Now, in this one, though, we'll get to those. We're going to come down here and we're going to look at what if it is a negative with a group, and then it was started as a negative 12x minus 46. So this is where it's tricky. So I'm going to do kind of what I've noticed a lot of students do in their work sometimes when they forget. Not maybe so much in this lesson by the end, but when it comes up like in a day or two when we haven't done these problems, and all of a sudden mixed in with that like times 8 before, it pops in. A lot of people will get the negative of the negative 12x to be negative of a negative is a positive 12x. And here's where the error comes in. They just copy this one down because it sort of looks like you just bring it down. Well, if we think about that hidden 1 here, and it's a hidden negative 1 being multiplied, so negative 1, so negative times a negative is a positive 12, and a negative times a negative is a positive. So this needs to be a plus 46, and 1 times 46 is 46. So to kind of clean it up so it looks nicer, 12x, which is positive, plus 46. So we really need to be careful with that and looking out for that, distributing our negative. So here's where it gets a little tricky. So let's look at 8 minus the group. Now, a lot of students want to distribute. Remember back up here where we had that 8 and we distributed it up here at the very top? Well, this up here that's distributed up here is we can distribute because we're multiplying. If we look down here, we're not multiplying by 8. So 8 is not going to be distributed. It's that hidden 1 right here that's right in front of it. So what you want to kind of think about is that picture in your head. What number is in front, right directly in front? Not way up in front, but directly in front of it. And it's our negative 1. So another way to think about this is a plus, changing our subtraction to adding the opposite. So our negative 1 gets multiplied by not only the first term, but the second term. So we want to bring down the 8. I'll bring down the plus now. And then negative 1 times 2x, so negative times a positive is a negative 2x. And a negative times a negative is a positive, and 1 times 4 is 8. So when we simplify this, we can put the 8's together. So bring out that negative 2x out front. That's where I like my variable x out front. Plus 8 plus 8 is 16. So this would simplify to 8 plus 8 is 16, plus 16 at the end. And remember, it's a positive. So now, once we think about that, we can work or use these within our equations. So we're going to solve a few equations using this technique of that hidden 1. So example number 5, 14 equals negative group P minus 8. So now, can you see where the negative 1 is, that hidden negative 1? It's right here in front of the parentheses, and it's not just a 1, but a negative 1. So negative 1 times P and negative 1 times a negative 8. So bring down that 14, bring down the equals, right above it, and negative 1 times P is a negative 1p, so we can put the 1 in there if you want. We don't have to, but we can. We could just say negative p. Negative 1, negative times a negative is a positive, and 1 times 8 is 8. So it's going to be a positive 8 at the end. So now that I have, it's just a two-step equation. So I went from kind of a tricky negative out front to a two-step equation, and I can solve that by zeroing out that positive 8 with a minus 8. If you do it to one side of the equal sign, you have to do it to the other side of the equal sign. And we get 14 minus 8 is, goes in this is 6. Took me a little while to go over that, 10. So now we want to bring that negative 1p down because we haven't done anything with it. Now, a common error is kind of adding 1 to both sides, which would not be the correct way because we are not subtracting 1 here. We are multiplying by a negative 1. So to cancel out multiplying by a negative 1 is divide by a negative 1. That will cancel that out. Do it to one side of the equals, we can do it to the other side of the equals. So 6 divided by a negative 1 is a negative 6 because a positive divided by a negative is a negative, and we get p on the right-hand side. Now, if you'd like to have that p on the right-hand side or left-hand side, which I do, what we want to do is rewrite it here. We don't want to simplify our work up here. We want to keep the p on the right And then right at the last minute to write our answer, we want to use that equality and move them around. Now we have one more problem. And this one gets into that 3x minus x, the group, the quantity x minus or x plus 5 equals negative 25. Now, you might get the urge to distribute that 3x into both of them, but we have to remember it's that hidden 1. So do you see where that hidden 1 is? It's right here in front of that parentheses. And that's the big concept for this lesson, is seeing that hidden negative 1. And then we can use that, plus a negative 1 here. We'll get that negative right with that 1, and we can distribute that into the group. So bring down that 3x, bring down the plus. Negative times a positive is a negative 1x, and a negative 1 times a negative times a positive is a negative. 1 times 5 is 5. Bring down the equals, bring down the negative 25. So now I see I can add my x's together. So 3x plus a negative 1x is a positive 2x. There's more positives left over. So positive 2x minus 5 equals negative 25. And now it's a two-step problem. So we can add 5 to both sides to zero out the negative 5. Bring down my 2x. Bring down the equals. And 25 minus 5 is 20. But there's more negatives left over. There's more negatives, so that means my 20 is a negative 20. And then to get x by itself, divide both sides by 2, and x equals negative 10. So we want to make sure that when we start with this subtracting a group, that we remember that hidden negative 1 in front, so that negative, we can change it to a plus a negative 1, can be then distributed out into that group and get the signs correct before we continue on our solve.